Hi everyone, this is Moni Singh, and welcome back to our Teaching STEM podcast and video series. I'm continuing down the path of discussing coding, teaching children how to code. And last time we left off, we were talking about the I/O devices, the input and output devices on a computer, and I want to pick it right back up at the same place. Um, you've kind of discussed with children about the different input output devices that are there on a computer. Now, don't stop right there. And this is where the four-dimensional learning, I think many of you have heard me talk about how we can really make the learning not just one-dimensional, where the child is learning about a core concept. Yeah, that's the one dimension only. We have to accentuate that learning by adding in other dimensions, and one of those dimensions is the cross-cutting concepts, right? There are some concepts which actually cross over, across different learning subjects. Let me put it that way, right? So they can cross over industries, they can cross over. So, for example, here we are discussing computers. But there are ways in which you can create connections into other learning that the child is involved in. For example, you can take the concept of what we're learning here, input and output, and apply that to, let's say, geography, world map, or you can take it onto the side of biology, human body. So if you have a child who is in second grade and you're also teaching them about human body, this will be a great connection you can draw. And of course, there are many different kinds of connections you can draw, and it's good to bring that learning from all different points of cross connections, because that makes the learning stay, and really for the child to connect with what they're learning new. So I wanted to share with you at least a few examples focusing on this input and output devices, so that way you can see how you can create some of these cross connections. Um, so first of all, we were discussing I/O devices. So if you remember, these are the input, the devices which bring input into the computer, and then output devices being the devices that take the output out, like bring something out. So for example, a screen on a normal, like a regular computer, would be an output device, right? It's able to show us what we tell the computer to show us. And then on a touch screen, the screen also becomes an input device because we can touch it and give it inputs. And then you have a headset, which is allowing you to hear things coming out of the computer. So that's an output device, and so on and so forth. So here is a connection that you can make of this with, let's say, geography. So anything to do with world maps and locations that you might be doing with children. You can begin with the world map, and you can, wherever you are situated, you can start there, right? And talk about the children, give them a big idea. Like, for example, I'm sitting here in US on the East Coast, so I will say, okay, kids, this is where we are right now, and then let's cross over from the Atlantic Ocean. We'll go all over the Atlantic Ocean, move towards the Mediterranean Sea. We are going into this area, which is like the southern part of Europe, or just north of the Africa. So we are going into that area, Iraq, the Middle East. Okay, we are going to go right there, and you can start zooming in with the kids. So you're giving them a sense of geographically where you are heading to. And so we are zooming in right into this area, which is Israel, Egypt. You can see that part. That area is so rich in history. I'm sure it touches a lot of different social studies and other classes you might be doing. So it's a great connection you can make there. And I'm going to tell a story related to input and output. So we're going to zoom in further, and being just on the east side of Israel, between Israel and Jordan. Okay, so right there you can look in the map. On the top there is the Sea of Galilee. You can see it marked up, and then we have Jordan River that flows. So there's Jordan River that's flowing north to south, and it kind of goes into the Sea of Galilee, and then it flows down further, and then towards Dead Sea. People may have heard about Dead Sea before as well. So remember that map, okay? Sea of Galilee on the north, then we have, and the Jordan River is kind of going all the way and then going into the Dead Sea. So what's the story there? And this is one of my favorite stories. And you can have many of your own stories, things that you can discuss with kids. So you can ask children, have you heard about the Dead Sea? Some people may have, some may not. So it's always one thing that you'll always hear from me is you want to make it very inquiry based so that the children are part of this discussion. Anytime we have a discussion, right? Most of the times we're doing hands-on activities, but when we have a discussion, make them a part of it. So some kids may have heard about it, some may not. So Dead Sea basically has a lot of salt in it. I think some people know about it. It's almost 10 times the salt that's in a normal ocean water. And so because of that high saltiness, right? So people can float in it. And this was when I actually went to that part of the world. I was thrilled. I'm not a swimmer. At least at that point in time, I couldn't swim much. And the moment you put your feet inside the water, your feet just lifts up, and you're basically just floating. And it was amazing. For the first time, I could go really swim and swim, literally swim, because you can swim, right? You know, you're not going to sink, and swim as far as I could. So that was amazing. So people will float it in. You can sit down and just read a book while you're floating without using a floaty. So it's amazing. Um, and because of that high saltiness, right? Um, no plants or animals can survive in the Dead Sea water. It has no plants, it has no fish, no animals, and that's why it's called dead. But just north of Dead Sea, so if you remember that map I showed you, there's the Sea of Galilee. And the Sea of Galilee actually is very alive. You actually have lots of restaurants around that Sea of Galilee, and you basically can eat, fishes which are fished right out of that sea. And so fresh sea fishes and stuff, you can actually enjoy that. You know the dishes there. So both the Dead Sea and the Sea of Galilee, they receive water from one source. It's the Jordan River that's going, across from north to south, and it's bringing water to both the seas. Sea of Galilee is alive, and the Dead Sea is dead. So what's the difference, right? Why do you see this kind of a significant difference between the two seas, which are really just fed by the same source of water? Now this gets really interesting, and the way I explain to kids is that with the Sea of Galilee, the input and output, they're working in complete balance. It's perfect. There is in and then there is out. Okay, water is going into the sea, and then water is coming out. So what happens is when the water comes in, it brings a lot of nutrients, all the eroded rocks and minerals, they all come in. Of course, the fishes and other marine life also comes in there. It comes in, but then there's also an output. So the water flows out. It takes away any excess, unwanted stuff, and because of this flow going on, there is life. Everything is normal and perfect balance. But the input and output for the Dead Sea is all messed up. Water flows in, but there is no output. There is no outflow of the water. The water just comes in. There's no out. If you look at the world map, you'll see there's nothing that kind of takes the water out. So what happens is that because the water cannot flow out, it can only evaporate with the sun. So the sun evaporates the water. But then, because there's no flow, when the sun evaporates the water, it leaves all that salt, the minerals, the rock, everything that's coming, with the erosion. It all stays right there. So Dead Sea gets the input but has no output, and it's dead. So, one of the learnings here is that healthy input and output are needed for something to function. So again, that's just one story where you can connect, you can tie in that geographic connection and bring in some other conversation as you're discussing input and output. One of the other things I also like, taking that input output and moving it into human body. And you can actually ask kids the question about, where else do you see inputs and outputs working together? And you can have children shout out different ideas that they can think about of IO devices. You can ask them, can you think of any organs that are input or output? And you can let children think and respond. When they think of an organ, you can ask them, what does the organ do, and what kind, are they input or is it an output organ, and why? And again, your point is that you want to discuss the explanation and then stretch as needed, so that again the child has knows something, but then you are actually able to um, augment that knowledge with some other inputs. As they think about any of the organ, and you can actually have some other questions to keep the conversation going in the right direction. So, for example, okay, what gets outside pictures and scenes into our body? Oh, that's an eye. Right, great. So, what kind of device is an eye? And children might say, oh, this is an input device, right? We're able to take in all these visuals all around us. But what else can an eye do? Can it water sometimes? Yeah, it can, right? So there's something coming out of the body and it's coming out from the eyes. So it's also an output device. It's taking inputs, but then sometimes you also get this, the water coming out. Let's think about ear, and then you can think about other human body, the input and output organs, like, of course we have nose, we have mouth, we have skin, we have all the excretory parts as well. So it becomes an interesting discussion, and then you can follow that up with a quiz time, and we it's so much fun doing it with children. You can actually split your class into groups. For smaller groups, you can keep it as children playing individually. For bigger groups, you can split into groups of 2 to 3, and you can almost make it like a quiz time. One of the ways we do it will be that it's a buzzer quiz. So when you read the question after that, the kids are supposed to say the word buzz. So that's like they buzzed. Or of course, if you have a device, you can use a device. And the first one to say buzz gets to answer the question, and if the answer is correct, that's great. They score a point. If not, the remaining team get to answer the question, and you can keep moving on. And let me give you some questions to think about as that you can make as part of your IO quiz. Again, this is something you can really really take it in multiple directions. And if you are looking to do a recap of some of the other lessons that might have happened for the class, this can be a very interesting exercise. So here are some questions again, because we're focusing on IO. So name an input part in a car. And the answer could be any of the things like the petrol intake or the oil intake or washer fluid. Any of those answers would be correct. Name an output part on a thermostat, right? So you could have a screen or some signal that tells the air conditioning system to turn on or off. Um, Name an output of your toilet. Now, of course, anytime we have discussion about toilet and human waste, for some children, especially for the younger kids, it becomes a very interesting conversation, um, and goes into some really silly directions. But of course, yeah, the water that's flushing out, that's an output. Name an input for your lawn, and it could be seed, soil, fertilizer, water. So you get the point, right? You can really help kids understand the concept that they're learning and apply it in many different other subjects that you are engaging kids with. So with that, we'll end this discussion. Keep thinking IO. And when we are thinking, we are talking, discussing computers. It doesn't have to stick to computers, right? Let's stretch that. Let's stretch it. That's very important. So keep stretching it, and we'll catch you next time. Take care, everyone.